I'm Dennis Marr. I'm the president of the local League of Women Voters of Monterey County. We always like to hear from the new supervisors after they've gotten into office for a while. So now it's Kate Daniels' turn. And to introduce her, we have Marilyn Maxner.
I think you all know a lot about her already, but I will just give you a little summary here. She's been in office just a little over 100 days. And her office is District 5, which is Carmel Valley, Big Sur, Pacific Grove, Pebble Beach, Monterey, Highway 68, and Las Palmas. She covers a big, varied area. And she had a little background for this. She was on the Monterey County Planning Commission. She worked with Supervisor Mary Adams, whose place she took. She's worked with State Senator John Laird. She's been the director of Gathering for Women, which is for homeless women in Monterey. She helped open Casa de Noche and Schumann Heart House, which are homeless shelters for single women and families. I asked her if she's always been interested in local government, and she said yes, she has, and she's just always found herself working in it. I said, was it your goal to be a county supervisor? And she said, no, it just happened that way. So it's all for you, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks, Marilyn. So, just to expand on that, it's just, ever since I was in high school, I found myself getting pulled into actions, but never set out to be an elected official or work in county government. That all happened very much by surprise. So thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be in a room with all of you and to see so many people that really do the work to ensure that the region where we live is equitable and safe and functioning in a democratic way. And so I just truly do appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about my first 100 days and to talk about myself. I really have to say, it's still a little weird. I'll go use the restroom at my office in Monterey, and I come back and I see my name on the door, and I'm like, why is my name on the door? Like, what is this? And it is very, very surreal because it's just, I don't think it just certainly isn't something that I set out to do or want to do, but it is a job that I think is really important, and it's really important that folks that are doing this work really care about what's happening in our community and have a vision for improving the situation for all members of our community, for having a concern about all members of our county, and really willing to put in the work to make the changes, make the decisions that will move Monterey County forward in a way that's positive for all community members. And that couldn't be more important than it is right now. I was writing somebody a note this morning, thanking them, and it sort of morphed into just some thoughts about the first 100 days since I knew I would be coming here to talk about that. And I had been thinking, I know this job before I got here. I know this job. I worked with Mary Adams. I've sat on the Planning Commission. I know what the constituents' concerns are. I know our county general plan. I know our local area land use plans. I know our zoning code. Like, I'm going to be able to do this job. I've gone through the budget hearings a couple times with Supervisor Adams. I've gone through the state budget hearings with Senator John Laird. I can handle this. But nobody, I think, can prepare themselves for what this administration has threatened counties like Monterey County and has threatened states like the state of California. And that has an immediate budgetary impact. That has an immediate impact on the safety and welfare of some of our most vulnerable county residents. And so it's become a really unsettling and at times terrifying time. And so that's a whole new aspect of this job that I was not thinking about. I mean, I knew obviously in November, as we all did, what the outcome of the election was, but the speed at which these executive orders are coming down the pipeline, and the potential dismantling of so many agencies that we rely on. I mean, whether it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that's telling us, and the USGS, the ability to measure the gauges of the rivers that then tell us whether or not the Carmel River is going to flood or the Salinas River is going to flood, or it's the hands-on wildland firefighting that's happening in the United States Forest Service, where we lost a handful of rangers, or the threat. I mean, fortunately in Monterey County, it hasn't reached our doorstep. But I was reading an article this morning on, I think it was Cal Matters, but in Kern County, the immigration sweeps and raids and the terror campaign that is going on, that is having a direct impact on the workforce and the ability for the agriculture industry to function. And then that was followed by an article in Florida where they're reconsidering child labor laws so they can pick the citrus in the groves because of the immigration sweeps there. I mean, this is insanity. And, you wonder why, you get to a certain point and you find yourself in a position to sit at a dais like the Board of Supervisors. And, I had a childhood and a grandmother who I loved very, very much. She's someone I looked up to so much. And she didn't talk much about her childhood. But when she got to the United States via Cuba from Europe, she had a group of friends that were also German refugees. And they were also all Jewish, 5 women. And they would tell me the story, because there were 2 types of German Jews that I knew growing up. The ones who spoke about the past and they spoke about their history incessantly, and the ones who never spoke about it at all. And that was my grandmother. But, through the friends and through other relatives, my grandmother's story was always passed on to us. And it is so crazy how similar that period in the early 1930s in Germany, when she was told at one point first that she was no longer allowed to attend the public school, and if she wanted to go to school, she had to find a private school, that then, changed to this need for her to wear a Star of David on her jacket in order to identify herself as a Jewish child, to the point where, then her mother was not smart enough. It's not about being smart. She was questioning enough and concerned enough that she sent her children to other parts of the world in order to get out of Germany. And then arriving in the United States ultimately to a really anti-Semitic period of time in Los Angeles is where she and her family arrived. But there was those stories and those experiences that were passed along, and even the ones that weren't, that they're sort of imprinted in your DNA, and it has literally all of my hackles are up, and family members who are experiencing like PTSD, really, just like this is a sense of just such an ominous replay of history and how democratic societies can truly fall. And so being a supervisor, I guess, going back to that and sort of having that pressure of what we do today as a county. And I feel very clear about this opportunity here as a county supervisor to be at the dais with these other 4 individuals and do what we can in Monterey County. I think this is perhaps one of the being local and local service is perhaps some of the most effective way that we can be of service and do something to help our community and our county right now. And so I feel really like this is the time, this is the place, and I also had this experience. The job has its downsides, right? I mean, there's some really ugly parts of being an elected official and putting yourself out there. And so I'm wholly okay if this were not to last very long. If it were 4 years, it's 4 years. If perhaps it's 8 years, it's 8 years. But I'm feeling like I can be big and bold and do what's needed. And if you all have other plans for who you want to be your supervisor in the future, I am going to be totally okay with that as well. And I will continue on in other ways of being of service. So I really do feel emboldened to like do what's right, do it now, move the needle. So what do we need to move the needle on in other areas outside of ensuring that we still have a democracy, right, next year, ensuring that our community members don't disappear, ensuring that our most vulnerable Medicaid recipients don't show up as they are right now at the pharmacy and finding that their life-saving medication is no longer covered by Medicaid, which is happening. And so, how do we keep our public health department, fully funded when so much of that budget relies on federal money that's at risk? Same with our colleges and universities and our research and all of the things that we rely on. So outside of all that, what are the things that in 2024 I was thinking about when I ran for this seat, and what are we doing about that now? As many of you know, my big concern in running for county supervisor was housing and the cost of living in Monterey County. I grew up in Monterey County, I was born and raised here, and the fact that so many people can no longer live in our region, the fact that so many people are priced out of our region, not only is it something that is sad and disappointing, it's something that is not functional if you want to have a community, right? If you want to have a society where all of our needs are met, we need to be able to have community members, right, in that society. And as I was on the campaign trail in 2024, just being out in the community, meeting people, being in walking door to door in places like Carmel by the Sea, which has lost thousands of residents since I was growing up, right? Where it's become second homeowners, third homeowners, vacation owners. When I was growing up, it didn't matter if you were, if you were a school teacher in the district, if you were a firefighter, police officer, a plumber, and these are all I'm thinking as I'm saying these names, the people I knew. And I could give you their names as well that lived in our community, that no longer can live in our community. And it's ironic because one of the things I hear the most about out and about in the community is traffic. People are terrified of traffic. They're upset about traffic. They talk about Carmel Hill. They talk about Monterey traffic coming in and out. They talk about Highway 68 traffic. And that traffic are people coming to work on the Monterey Peninsula, whether it's the person at your doctor's office, whether it's the firefighter, whether it's the teacher in the school, whether it's the hospitality worker. That's who's on the street in the morning, and that's who's on the roads on the way home in the afternoon. And so I really do hold a big vision for figuring out how we can build the housing that our community needs. And I also hold a real appreciation for the aesthetic of this place. I think we live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I love the rural quality of our region. I love the historic nature of our region. And there is a way also to build units that really are congruent, in line with the aesthetics of this area. And so my focus will never be on supporting developments filled with single-family homes. That's something that I think supervisors of the past may have supported. That's something that supervisors that are currently on the dais may support because they think all housing is good housing. But, here on the Monterey Peninsula, I really do believe that the proliferation of these types of developments actually have a negative impact, and they sell for so much money, and the reliance on having to build these units in order to have the affordable component pencil out means that the units are going to be as luxury as possible, and it just drives up the cost of living, and it's sprawl. It's not what we need. But there is a way for adaptive reuse. There is a way to build units around our commercial centers. There is a way to take commercial buildings and turn them into apartments, and it's something that would be a net, right? It would be a positive. I always talk about this, but every time my kids are at that age and they love Del Monte Shopping Center, it's like, where will you take me to the mall? And I'm going to go watch a movie and then go to Chipotle or whatever it is, and they love just hanging out. And it doesn't matter if you're at that Rite Aid with not a single thing on the shelf anymore, or you're over by the movie theater, or the old Mervyn's, which I think is maybe now an exercise place. I mean, there's all of these places in that mall that could become an apartment complex, even a small one, it doesn't matter, but they would only benefit the shops and the businesses that are in the place, and it would provide housing for people in our community. So it's really about figuring out ways as a county supervisor to streamline those projects and make them happen, encourage these types of public-private partnerships in order to build the housing that we need. I know that we want to get to questions, and I'm sure I've been speaking for about 20 minutes or so. I want to have time to answer your questions and to talk about what you want to talk about. But before I end, I'll just talk about sort of what goes hand in hand with the housing. And what goes hand in hand with the housing is our water supply. And the water supply challenge that we have on the Monterey Peninsula and in District 5 is something that's been ongoing since I was in high school, right? It's been ongoing since I was in high school. So I am very committed to moving past the politics that have also governed the water supply conversation for so long in order to get this cease and desist order lifted. Because I really do believe that if we're going to build the housing that we need in a way that is not the paper water way of the big developments, whether that's September Ranch or up at the Preserve or the Rancho Cañada villages, we really need to be able to demonstrate to the State Water Resources Control Board that we have an adequate water supply to lift the cease and desist order and be able to do the kinds of things that we will need that order lifted in order to do. So for example, the idea I had about adaptive reuse, taking a commercial building and turning it into apartment. Well, that's a rezone, and a rezone is not allowed. You can't change the zoning. It's not allowed under the cease and desist order. If we need to add a meter, that's not allowed under the cease and desist order. If we needed to intensify use, and so we would have something that was normally a single family home or just a building that had a commercial use that didn't require a lot of water, we needed to add more water. All of these are things that aren't allowed under the cease and desist order. So that's something I really do want us to make progress on, and it's going to take supporting the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District in that effort. It's going to take making the argument to the State Water Resources Control Board that the water we have from Pure Water Monterey expansion is enough to lift that cease and desist order, and then it really is going to take even more creative ideas to think about extra source water that we could store that could also make those projects, those recycling projects, even more sustainable. So I'm glad I get the opportunity to sit on the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board as well as the Board of Supervisors, among many other committees and commissions. But it's also just a big focus of mine. I really want to bring that up too, because you can't have the housing conversation if we don't have the water supply. We can't build the housing that we need to build if we don't lift the cease and desist order. So I feel like I'm in all the right places to be able to make progress, and with all of you, I know that we can be successful. So with that, what would you like to talk about?
It's my understanding that for water credits, people who have grapes for winemaking can use that as agriculture. And a lot of people move here and they put in their wineries and they're using up water. So I want your take on that. And then my selfish question is, I wish the Monterey County could do better with El Caminito. You lived on that street and it is too narrow, it's unsafe, and it needs a lot of work.
So the first question, if I understand correctly, is that there might be a loophole with grapes and
Yes.
water usage because it's agriculture.
Yes. They get an exemption.
And this is in the CalAm service area?
I believe so.
Because I can see where that would work with a well, if you had your own private well, but I can't, I mean, if it's in the CalAm service area, I think outdoor use is outdoor use, and you'd be paying a lot of money in order to grow a vineyard. But I could be wrong, Cynthia, I don't know about that, but
But even wells,
Yeah.
some people say, well, it's your well, it's your water, because you're over, you can do, it belongs to all of us.
absolutely, and wells are definitely not governed and managed in the same way that our water that comes from CalAm is. So water is water, and I think we should be very careful about all of the water. I mean, we're limited to the 3,376 acre feet of water from the Carmel River, but that doesn't count any of the folks who have wells along the river that are pulling water out of the river. The wells that would be where I'm more familiar with the vineyards that are growing in Carmel Valley are different. They don't come from that aquifer. They come from these like shale formations that will ultimately run dry, and those folks often have to then dig another well once one they're in goes dry. So it's an issue. I don't know about the exemption, and there is certainly a proliferation of vineyards in Carmel Valley. And El Caminito. Monterey County did pass, and I'm grateful that taxpayers supported Measure AA. And Measure AA is supposed to create alternate sources of revenue for our roads. I don't know about widening El Caminito. When I lived there, that was our first shocker, was when we almost didn't get insurance because the width of the road was too narrow and we had no idea. But there are many, many roads like El Caminito in Carmel Valley and in Monterey County that need attention. And my hope is that with Measure AA's passage, we can actually, one of the things we were able to do was take all of that money and get it put into an assignment account. So it doesn't just get taken up absorbed into the general fund and spent, but that we can actually look at all the money that is collected in Measure AA, and that we can start to use it in ways that maybe some of those roads that don't make the cut generally by the formula that the county's been using in the past can actually get identified, and an allocation can go to some of those smaller roads that really do need attention. So that's my hope. Yes, Beverly.
Thanks for being here, Kate. My question is, could you please tell us whether or not you support the CalAm desal project and why? And also whether your Chief of Staff, former Mayor of Salinas, Kimberly Craig, agrees with you.
So I do not support the CalAm desal project. I am very concerned about the cost of that project. I'm very concerned about it potentially being the most expensive water that's ever been sold on the planet. And that is absolutely unacceptable. It's one of the reasons why I support Public Water Now, and it's why I support public acquisition of CalAm, because no matter what, I believe that if a water supply is publicly owned and operated, then you no longer have this obligation to investors. Vistra is another perfect example why investor-owned utilities don't work for us. When it's something that is in the public good, when there is such a need to protect not only the natural environment, but the people who you serve, those have to be publicly owned and operated entities. So since that Since the CalAm desal plant is going to be an investor-owned utility, I do not have any pathway for supporting it, and I'm very concerned about the time it's taken and all of the legal obstacles that it has that will ultimately fall on the backs of the ratepayers. And so for that reason, I do not support it. It's not that I don't support desal, and I do believe in 2025, we do have an opportunity to look at other forms of brackish desal that at this point in time are not vacuums placed in the bottom of the ocean like the one that was happening in Southern California, and I'm spacing on its name right now, but that fortunately was defeated at the Coastal Commission, that are very detrimental to the ocean environment. But brackish desal that's less energy intensive, it produces less brine, and it's less costly. If it were publicly owned, I would support a project that could desalinate water. In terms of my chief of staff, I have known Kimberly Craig since I was in high school, and this is a very different role than her role as the mayor of the city of Salinas. We get about 100 phone calls a day, about 30 phone calls a day, over 100 emails a day. So I hired the best person to be able to manage the incoming constituent needs in our office, which is largely road conditions. It's largely issues with housing and community development, which is an unbelievably dysfunctional department at the County of Monterey, and any other thing that you are all familiar with that comes through our inbox. I need someone who can handle that level of incoming, can respond, who's creative, who's smart, in order for me to be able to do this job, for me to be able to work on the issues that I care about and move the needle. Because if I can't move the needle here on the issues I care about, this isn't worth your time having me here, and it's not worth my time having me here, because there are people, I think, that run for office so they can sit in that comfy chair at the dais and feel powerful. That's not worth it. It's just not worth it. It is a really hard job, and I put the best team together to be able to do that work. So I hope that answers your question. Yes?
I'm curious about what's going to happen with the oil samples.
So a couple things, and I think this is the role of the Board of Supervisors, is that something like this happens and the county has an immediate response that is a little more coveted. They keep it sort of close in, and not their natural inclination isn't get the information out. So we as a board, and me in particular, since January 17th when this has happened, is get the information out, get the information out, get the information out. So testing has been regular from state entities, from California EPA and the US EPA, as well as the Department of Toxic Substances Control. So ongoing testing has been done, but it's really about release that information, get that information out. We also initially, which was a really good kick in the pants for the county, was when the San Jose State University researcher came out initially before the county had, and it's not that the county testing hadn't started yet, but he was able to get results to his testing because he was able to analyze his results, ours went to the state of California, and we were at the mercy of them returning those results to us. So what did the first initial results show? They showed that there were high levels of nickel, manganese, and cobalt, thank you, on the surface. And what he did was a surface testing, and I'm not remembering the name of the tool that he used, but it was strictly on the surface and showed that there were these high levels. I got to be in the very first meeting with him where he was releasing that. It was a Saturday on Zoom, and I asked the researcher, I said, what does this mean for public health? Can we eat the strawberries that are being grown down the road? Or can we eat the artichokes? And that was the only actual two crops that were in the area that were growing at the time. And he was very frank. He said, I have no idea. That's not my area. I can't tell you what that means. And so really then pushing the county and pushing the Department of Public Health in California, saying, when you give us those results, we need to know what it means for public health. In regards to what we did get back from the Public Health Department and what they've been continuing to monitor, they're doing two things. They're looking at the surface, like the researcher from San Jose State University, and they're going deeper in the soil and taking, they're digging it out, right? And that'll tell you what has seeped down into the soils. But then we had those big rainstorms. So we have everything that's washed into the slough. We have everything that was released into the atmosphere, although we are monitoring and have been monitoring not just what the Monterey Bay Air Resources Board had the technology to monitor, but also the hydrofluoric acid monitoring that was important, or hydrofluoride, important to measure as well. So both types of measurements have been ongoing. It is bizarre to me that at this point in time, there hasn't been anything alarming that's been identified, because when you have that many pounds of batteries that burn up into the atmosphere, it has to go somewhere. It has to sort of fall back down onto the earth. And so that is really concerning, and that needs to be continued to be monitored. The ag industry, the ag commissioner's office has continued to do monitoring, and so it is happening. And the work I think we have as a board of supervisors is continue to pressure the county to release all the data so people have what they need to also run their own tests, do their own interpretations, and then just make sure everything that we produce is available. We do not want to see, as a board, either of these facilities come back online until we have answers, until we understand how this fire started, until we understand if there are steps we can take to make sure it never happens again. One thing I can say is this idea that it was ever okay to take these racks. I think we had 100,000 modules in that building of batteries, and there were 56 batteries in each module. They were literally from floor to ceiling inside a building, is something that truly does not make sense and was extremely dangerous. And so I don't think we will ever see that again, and that's a priority of our board. I think there are results that you could see now. There is a website on the county health, it's either at the county health department page. There is a Moss Landing website on the county that takes you through every single step that's happening right now in terms of remediation. It's done in conjunction with a group that meets regularly that includes the state of California Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Department of Public Health, our local environmental health, and others. And the page is fairly robust, and all of the testing results are also posted to that page. So I think that there are good resources that are available for you to look at right now online on the Monterey County homepage.
I'm going to follow up on that one because I'm feeling very torn about it, because I absolutely care about people's health and the animals' health and our ecosystems. I also am very active about climate change, and that place is connected to the grid. We have something like 4 terawatts that are not connected to the grid because they don't have wires. That place has wires. So one of the things I've wondered is anyone researching, that was a very old, on the scale of it, very old battery plant. There are a lot more new ones where they have organized them in a way that they're much cooler. They have systems for that. What is the best way to build batteries, and then have the county say, we will only accept something of this quality, and use that so that we don't say, oh, throw the baby out with the bathwater and we're going to kill our otters and kelp from climate change. How do we make lemons out of lemonade and say, hey, other people are doing this. A lot of research has gone in since then. So what is the latest research? How can we use it? And isn't anybody thinking about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are thinking about it. And so some of the questions are, is lithium ion necessary? Are there other forms of batteries that aren't lithium ion? Indoor facilities like this should never be permitted again. Like, there should never be a facility that's indoors and have this expectation that somehow some kind of thermal runaway event like the one we just had won't happen. And that's actually pretty standard now. I don't know that a building like this would have been built today. And so that's really important. Individual outdoor container facilities, I believe, are safer, though we did have a fire at the Tesla battery plant, but nothing of this magnitude. And so I'm not going to claim expertise in this. I'm leaving that to the legislators who are working on legislation. But I will say it is really important that we store energy where the grid comes together, like you said. I hear a lot of folks saying, put it out in the desert, put it out, and you have to think all the time about the carbon footprint of building an energy grid all the way out to Death Valley or wherever you're suggesting we put it. Could be worse for the environment. We've done a really good job minimizing oil and gas production in Monterey County. We are decommissioning the last nuclear power plant in the state, and so we really do have to ask ourselves, how are we going to continue to keep the lights on in California and do so in the greenest way possible? One thing that is not okay is if this means whatever choices we make, if it is that we are going to rely more heavily on fossil fuels that now are not in California, and instead they're being imported from other parts of the country, or God forbid from Saudi Arabia, that carbon footprint is far worse. And so we do have to think holistically here as we move down this path.
With the Moss Landing fire, what did they do with the crops? Were crops affected by that? Were they thrown out? Were they sent to market?
I know that right after the event, they have a track and trace program on all of our produce, and you're able to look up with a QR code where it was grown, and there wasn't anything that I know of that went to market. I can't speak for the Ag Commissioner, but they have high levels of testing, which includes surface testing on individual berries and lettuce. And so they were very concerned, and I know the growers were very concerned, probably more because of profit losses and things like that. But I couldn't answer your question, but I'm confident because we were really pushing, and we were told underneath the plume there was some artichokes. The berries were all in greenhouses, and so they were confident. Yeah.
I'm from Flint, Michigan. I moved out here back in 2016, and you all know about the water issue.
Yeah.
So a little gun shy about believing what the government's telling us now.
I would agree. I would agree. But if there was nothing, I think we have to worry about what's in the environment now before new crops are put in, and really understand. But if nothing's growing, then nothing's growing. I did ask the question, and this was something that the county did put out, which is if there was nickel on your fruits and vegetables, if there was manganese, if there was cobalt, this is something that can be washed off with soap and water. And so that was why they sent the guidance out that if you're growing your own fruits and vegetables, to please wash them or throw them out. And that all did come from the county, and it went to, it's up on the page still to this day on the county website. So I think, again, that's why the supervisors are here. We're your elected officials, we're your representatives, and we push on the county. We don't take anything at its face value and accept it. That's why we're here, to represent you.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
I was wondering how much of the county budget is from federal sources, including pass-throughs, and have we seen much clawbacks or money being taken away?
Yes, it's terrifying. It's about, when you just think about the county budget as a whole, it's about 12%. But then you think about all the grants, right, that come in, that come to, whether it's county departments or come to just the organizations that we rely on so heavily, you know, whether it's our homeless services or other programs that really make sure that our community's needs are met. So much of that is public grants, is federal grants. We're looking at what's happening in our system of higher education. And those threats, when we're talking about Medicaid, and we're talking about the number of seniors in senior living facilities that are using Medicaid, not Medicare, but Medicaid, in order to fund their stay, and the fact that that could be clawed back. When we look at Veterans Affairs and all of those cuts, you know, even with veterans, I was reading this morning that 30% of the government workforce, so not just at Veterans Affairs, but in the workforce, are veterans. Veterans are taking a huge, huge hit. And then, of course, our children and in our schools that rely on Medicaid because they have disabilities. It is so much bigger than the 12%, which is already a huge, huge number. This is really something that could be catastrophic. And then you look at the unraveling of industries like the agriculture industry if a workforce cannot or is too scared to show up, or is, in fact, as we've seen in other parts of the country, literally disappearing without a trace.
You mentioned the dysfunctional planning department. They have lost all senior staff at this point. This has been going on for as long as I've been here, which is well over 30 years. Do you have any suggestions on how we can make it a functional agency?
So I'll start by saying that, you know, 30 years ago when you began paying attention, there were probably 35 planners. That number is down to 15, and then you count folks who are out on medical leave or other things, and we lose another 5. So we're at 10 or less trying to do the work of the county, which is all the processing of the permits, but also all of the ordinances. We've had lots of conversations here about things like short-term rentals. We've had conversations here about the production of accessory dwelling units and building of affordable housing. We talk about the imposition of large-scale events in our community. I mean, all of these things are things that the county planning department is responsible for. We've talked about the housing element, which is going to be a full 2 years late if we're lucky. And that is all the planning department. One of the things I'm starting to sort of just look at is that this is supposed to be a department that pays for itself, right? So through permit fees and whatnot. But you think about all of the other responsibilities, like the housing element, that don't necessarily get paid for by permit fees, and that's a challenge. I don't know yet how to address that, but there's something with the structure. The other way that I'm, again, focusing on is one of the reasons we lose planners is because they cannot afford to live here. And so they come, they get their feet wet, they get some initial training, and then they get a job with a city in another jurisdiction that pays more and that's more affordable to live, like Santa Clara. And so I do believe that Santa Clara pays a lot more, like a ton more than we do. And I'm not saying it's affordable, but they pay a lot more money for their planners than we do in Monterey County. And so in trying to build these units, one of the things that we're trying to do is bring together coalitions that will be part of this public-private relationship to build housing. So more so with places like Natividad Medical Center, I've been having these conversations, although I've had them with Housing and Community Development as well, Whereas if a group is getting together because there is some land that's in public ownership and you have an entity that's really interested in building workforce housing, would you like to be part of that coalition? So we can actually start creating opportunities for people not just to come to Monterey County to get their feet wet, but to come to Monterey County and to stay here. And so that's one of the ways I think I, as a supervisor, I do think, you know, right now, as much as I don't like the idea of outsourcing, you've got to get these planners out from underneath the pile of work that they have at their desk. We've got to start moving things so they can get some relief. So there is money in this year's budget that will be allocated to be able to provide some relief for those remaining planners and to help us to keep them here. But if we can't provide opportunities for them to find housing, I think we had some pretty significant union negotiations in the last couple years, and so I think the salaries are getting closer to being on par with other counties. They're not on par with the cities. We lose a lot of folks to cities, but I think those two at least will help. I'd like to see some women in leadership come to Monterey County. We've never seen that in the planning department. That would be nice in terms of just, not that I'm advocating for removal of anyone, but you know, I think when we have the opportunity and I get to be there, and I've never got to be there when we're making decisions about hiring, I hope I can provide some good input.
Kate, thank you. That was very encouraging. I want to bring up an issue that we haven't talked about. Many of the people in this room supported Measure Z in 2016. Monterey County passed a ballot measure requiring the local oil industry to clean up its mess, to stop injecting toxic wastewater into the deep aquifer, to have no new oil wells, and generally to regulate oil at the local level. This went through the California courts. 6 oil companies sued Monterey County. On appeal, the county dropped out. The only group appealing was the Measure Z, Protect Monterey County, and we lost all the way to the Supreme Court. But just last year, Dawn Addis, our wonderful new representative, passed legislation in the California legislature which permitted local jurisdictions to regulate the impacts of fossil fuel development in their counties. So now the Board of Supervisors has the ability, it has a mandate to implement the Measure Z components that the people voted for. I'm wondering if any of you have any appetite to do that, or is it too far down the list of things that we need to do? Climate change is still a big issue.
I don't think it's too far down the list, but Protect Monterey County has reached out to us and has expressed that they don't know if it's necessary. We had one supervisor come forward and he wanted to pass the no fracking part or enact it, and there was a lot of concern about why that was being asked of the board. And so with members of Protect Monterey County in the audience making public comment, it was recommended that we just, not move forward with this action because all of the protections that were afforded from Measure Z's passage and from Dawn Addis's bill, I think folks felt they were comfortable. So if you have another opinion about what we should do, I am all ears.
Well, just to reiterate, the fracking ban in Monterey County was the only part of Measure Z that held up. We have a fracking ban in Monterey County, and we have a statewide fracking ban. Fracking is not the issue. Why Supervisor Alejo brought it forward, I believe, was a distraction from the parts of Measure Z that would be truly effective in regulating fossil fuel development. Fracking was no longer the issue. It is doubly banned. But the other practices that are going on in Monterey County are the ones that need regulation.
So it sounds like you're saying that Dawn Addis's bill provides an opening to be able to address even more. And that's what you're asking about us taking action on.
Yes.
Got it,
No
got
new
it.
oil wells. Clean up the mess that you're making. Stop producing toxic waste that you're injecting into the aquifer.
Yeah.
You can treat the toxic waste. They treat 1/3 of it. The other 2/3 they do not, because they don't want to spend the money.
And the one that's really concerning that I have spoke with folks about is the oils that are no longer in, the wells that are no longer in use, and capping them and decommissioning them.
That's very important. And it's not in part of Measure Z, but that's also important. I think the regulation of oil at the local level in Monterey County is important. We are the 3rd or 4th largest oil producer in the state. So,
Thank you. I will definitely look into that.
thank you. Thanks for your service.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. So, thanks for everyone for coming. Remind you that we'll be having our annual meeting in May, and Sharon Miller says please fill out this survey, and we will see everybody soon. Thanks for coming.